Hello, my name is Cheyenne Roland, and today we'll be going over my action research project on traits or virtues as based on the critical thinking basic concepts and understanding test. My first step in this was action research. So based on the action research and my own insight on my skills, had scored 80% on basic critical thinking insight, 54% on element or component part of thought. My intellectual standard was at 48%. Intellectual trait or virtue was at 29%. And then obstacle to critical thinking was 36%, with a total composite score of 50%. Now, with all of these components, my weakest component by far was intellectual trait or virtues. From here, I began to wonder why this was and how I can change it. So I started thinking, is this something that is developed through education? If so, at what level of education? Is it someone in undergraduate, graduate, doctorate? And then are these students influenced by a certain concentration of their studies? Are art majors more inclined to have this than someone in a science degree or an engineering degree? I began asking these questions by doing a quick survey. So I got onto quick survey and asked a few friends, family, and colleagues to answer four scaled questions. But first, I had to collect a bit of basic information. This basic information included your gender, the highest level of education ranging from a high school degree to a doctorate degree, and then fields of study in your higher education. So is it the arts, sciences, education, engineering, or other? Once all of this basic data was collected, I started posing questions based on four components of trait or virtue: intellectual humility, intellectual integrity and empathy, and then fair mindedness. In intellectual humility, it was found that 9 of 14 participants answered by saying 50% of the time they pretended to know something they do not know. The highest response, there were 2 out of 14 participants who had answered that 70% of the time they answered they knew that they pretended to know something that they did not know. A couple of those questions would be intellectual integrity and empathy. Almost half of my participants answered that they were somewhat willing to take a risk for their organization if it was a rational thing to do. Now, this is going to be examining intellectual empathy. The highest standard was that of 70% of my participants said that they would take that risk. The next question I asked, which ties into intellectual integrity, was, do you know your own weaknesses or strengths? All participants answered that they were at least aware of their own weaknesses and strengths 70% of the time or more. From there, I went over to fair-mindedness. Now, I asked about fair-mindedness by asking my participants how biased you are in emotional situations. Unfortunately, I put biased or I'm Switzerland in my scale of 1 to 10. Those mean the same exact thing. However, I was able to contact all the participants and let them know that 1 is going to represent extremely biased and 10 is extremely unbiased. So, with my participants knowing that information, 12 out of 14 were middle of the line on emotional situations. So after I had collected all this research methods, or all this research through a quick survey and by asking questions dedicated to traits or virtues, I came to the conclusion for some results. So based on my raw numbers on an Excel that I had done, the arts majors had a higher concentration of intellectual traits or virtues than that of sciences, engineering, high school degrees, or other. My conclusion is the study of arts allows that creative thinking for critical thinking to occur. In those arts degrees and arts concentrations, you're going to have a lot more research papers and rooms for exploration that I think sometimes you will not find in a scientific degree. This is mostly because until you reach the point that you are researching science, it is very much theory and fact based. I know that 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen will produce water. However, and you won't be, reaching those higher levels of research and critical thinking until you begin questioning why H2, two hydrogens and two oxygens produce water. So, after thinking internally about my weaknesses and why they exist, and wondering how they can improve, and then going to my research and using a quick survey, polling a few friends, colleagues, and coworkers, and then analyzing my results, I have come up with a way forward. I would like to expand my participant research beyond intellectual traits and virtues. By this, I mean I would like to have my participants take the critical thinking basic concepts and understanding test. I would like to know overall what their score is, what their raw numbers are for each category. And then from there, I would like to support my original statement that the arts degrees are more inclined to have these traits and virtues, and then begin to examine at a micro level why. What assignments are professors assigning so that these people or these students are putting these critical thinking tools into their toolbox, and then find those tools and then expand them among all undergraduate degrees. Insert assignments into majors that wouldn't otherwise to facilitate these critical thinking skills at a young level, and then see where we can go from there. Thank you for listening to my presentation today. If you have any questions, please let me know.